welcome to the Product Design for Learning podcast. And we have Toby with us. Hello, Toby. And we have landed on the fairly clickbait title of The End of L&D. So, Toby, in 60 seconds, to start us off and make this way more engaging than some sort of clickbait nonsense, what has made you come to that conclusion that the end of L&D ? For those listening, is potentially a thing?
14 years in L&D, I think, is pretty much testament to that. Delivering products and services from an L&D perspective only seeks to really validate L&D's existence rather than designing things that the companies actually need to improve employee engagement and productivity, and in turn make the company more revenue, more money, more profit, all those kind of things. So what ultimately needs to happen is that if you want to take a holistic approach to product and service design for employees, you kind of need to break down the silos of recruitment, internal communications, L&D. I mean, L&D and internal communications are always kind of this Venn diagram, which causes a little bit of friction, certainly in large corporates. So ultimately, to make any of this product design, human-centered design stuff work properly, I think you probably just need to get rid of those silos and have a holistic employee experience design strategy.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. And that doesn't sound in any way like, I don't mean this in a bad way, it doesn't sound groundbreaking. Do you know what I mean? It just sounds logical and sensible. Yeah. And I'm sure there are probably people doing it somewhere in some shape or form. There's probably also a lot of people, which I'm sure we've both worked with, that say they're doing it. And then you get under the hood of it and they are not doing it at all.
Yeah.
So when we were talking about this last time, when we were kind of setting up the podcast, I was wondering, is this more an evolution of L&D, or are you thinking about something that is fundamentally completely different to how we view it now?
Well, the clickbait nature says it's going to be burnt to the ground and rebuilt anew. It probably isn't. It probably is an evolution, right? That if we looked at product and service design for customer experience, like that doesn't stick itself into a pigeonhole of, oh, it's this thing.
Yeah.
Whereas product and service design from an L&D perspective does. And it's like the thing that inhibits that is the very structure of a HR team. So I think the skills that we are developing, acquiring and stuff in L&D will just be reappropriated to employee product and service design. I think it fits really nicely when we look at human-centered design, the double diamond, all that design thinking, all these buzzwords, right, fit quite nicely into product and service design because they've already been applied in that world for a customer. So if we take that for an employee, then you start actually designing a human resources function that looks very much like the rest of the business. It has sales, it has marketing, it has customer success, it has product and service design. Even those four pillars, right, transform how you think about employee engagement and HR as a broader thing that learning development sits within. Yeah. And learning development maps into that. Internal communications maps into that. So does recruitment. But you shift the skills and the knowledge and the approaches to be something more akin to what happens in the rest of the business. And guess what? The rest of the business has learned how to measure those things as well. So it's like, well, let's just transpose some of that stuff over to HR and L&D, and then transpose some of the L&D stuff into that model as well, and combine this kind of Frankenstein approach, which is halfway business, halfway HR, and jobs are good.
I mean, just to use your little move there, because I thought it was quite fun. Customers equal cash, and that is also cash in and out. And also customers that are internal and external. So if you look at learning, like your customers are the other employees, it could also potentially be your customers if you're trying to help them understand what your product is, but then that kind of blows into sales. But either way, you still got to try and hook them. So your internal employees can still be sitting there thinking there is this, whatever the version of their learning offer is internally, but they can still very much just turn around and go, I'm going to look at everything that is over here that is not internal, and I will still get the same things, and it's probably going to be better, as in it's designed for an external customer, so they're probably choosing to pay for it, or they're getting their company to pay for it, but it's not the thing that has been made internally. So like when we're talking about customers equal cash as that kind of move, I think, and again, I'm sure you've heard this as well, the last I'm going to say 10 years. It might be a little bit longer than that. Might be a little bit less than that. Over the last 10 years, I've heard people saying learning needs to take a nod from and then insert industry here. So it's usually been things like marketing, or it's been things like real commercial operations, or at the moment we're talking about product design, or some people are talking about product design. But then they never really do it, or they never really adopt it fully. And what you're saying is don't just pick one or the other, or pick one that you kind of really have a focus on right now. Take all of them and bang them all into this big melting pot, because you've still got to sell to your customers. You've still got to hook them. You've still got to retain them. You've still got to service them with a good product or service. And if you don't, it's so easy for them just to go somewhere else. And then one of the things that I used to say to people I worked with was, what is the point in us turning up every day? And not in a flippant, like, I'm off down the pub. Like, it was more of a, if we're turning up and we're getting paid to be here, whilst there is an element of I'm turning up to be here to get paid to pay my bills, but there is also, I'm choosing to do this job because I'm good at it and I really like it, and we've got the opportunity to do something really interesting, rather than I am just turning up, I hate my job, it's paying the bills, and as soon as I clock off, I don't even think about it. I find that mad that does seem to be how people view L&D, as in when they're there, like, oh, this is great. And then they leave, and there's no consideration as to how this works or could work.
Well, and everything L&D does sits within human resources quite broadly. There are some organisations where it doesn't, but quite broadly, it sits within human resources. People function if they've changed their name in recent years. But what that kind of department looks after is everything an employee sees, feels, and touches that isn't, the work and the leaders, essentially. So it's that department's opportunity and responsibility to be able to offer a seamless end-to-end employee experience. And the whole structure of HR just does not enable that to happen. So it's not a criticism of L&D, but when L&D says, oh, let's use marketing, oh, let's use sales techniques, let's use commercial acumen to protect our own viability within organization, that's kind of hypocritical, because you are doubling down on creating a silo, or what might happen is that L&D supersedes HR and then HR sits under L&D. Now that would be a very, very crazy world. But if you look at learning technologies as an example, at the Excel last year, it had like a little bit of HR technologies bolted onto the side.
Yes.
Like 90% learning technologies and 10% HR technologies. Like, this feels like it's kind of the wrong way round.
But is that more because that is an event that is historically focused at learning? As in it's not that, and again, I could be wrong. Maybe we should get Big Don on and ask him, but like, is that a case of like, we just focus on learning people, so that's our deal. But by the way, you guys should also maybe think about this, rather than this is the hierarchy. Yeah. I don't know.
But when I go to HR events, there certainly isn't like an L&D bolt on, if that makes sense. It's considered as like a holistic part of that function. So this is where, and then we get things like RecFest, for example, which are obviously the same, but like RecFest doesn't have like a little HR tent bolted on, or actually it might do. Let us know in the comments. We're not live streaming. But it might, as this bolt on where it's like recruitment, internal comms and branding, employer brand, L&D all report into this function. So, you then kind of got to look to people like, I guess, CIPD, who kind of go, well, you're ultimately responsible as an industry body for defining how all these departments work together. And clearly they're not working together. They're working to validate their own existence. How do we make them all work together, but to create this seamless end-to-end employee experience? And I think just no one's really sat down and thought about it before, because the framework of HR, L&D, and all the facets around it have been tried, tested, implemented the same way for the past 30 or 40 years. Yeah, there's a little bit of human design in L&D. Yeah, there's a bit of marketing, but it's not necessarily transforming what it's doing. It is it is kind of just incremental change rather than the systemic change that's probably needed.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about, or you and I talk a lot about product design, service design, and I'm sure we talk to our clients about this a lot as well. And this is very geared up towards, at least for my end, is more geared towards learning products, but not coming at it with like an ADDIE or a whatever process someone feels like they should or shouldn't be following. I'm not going to start bagging on all the different processes. That's a whole other episode. But then some clients we work with love it. They get very excited by the fact that we're talking about real life products. Like we usually use an iPhone as an example and say, you know exactly what it is. You know exactly what the benefits are. And all I've said is the name of it. Like, so it's been designed very well, but it's also, to your earlier point, it's been marketed very well, to the point where my mum, for example, doesn't need an iPhone. She doesn't need a phone or a little computer in her pocket that is that powerful, yet she's got one.
Yeah.
Like, it's not for her. Like, she makes calls. She maybe can send a message every now and then, and that's about it. Like, it's completely wasted. But again, because of the marketing, because of the commercial aspect, they've done really well. So when we bring all this back down to consumer product design and how outside of L&D that works really, really well in most cases, what is the disconnect that L&D has now with everything that sits outside of it? What is the overall kind of high level, top level problems it has? And does it matter if there's a disconnect?
Well, I think your iPhone example is quite an interesting one to leverage there, because if you have an iPhone and you're not, let's say, using the App Store, then Apple might be going, oh, there's a huge amount of users not using the App Store. Maybe we should send them an email to make sure they use the App Store. So that kind of transcends itself inside an organization where it's like, oh, we created this learning product and we've got 30% adoption, but 70% aren't using it. How do we get the 70% of people that aren't using it to using it? Well, might I suggest that the 70% aren't using it because they don't need it or want it? Yeah. It's not about marketing it in that regard. It's like, actually, it's just a functional feature they don't want. Yeah. And I think this catch-all approach with L&D tends to kind of go, okay, we've designed an amazing thing. Technology providers are really good at this. It's like, oh, the learning experience platform is so good, it's so ubiquitous that every single employee in your company will want to use it. I highly doubt that, because that's like saying I've invented a phone and it's so ubiquitous that every single person on the planet is going to have exactly the same phone. That hasn't happened. I mean, it's close, but it hasn't happened.
Basically,
exactly right. But there's that opportunity for choice.
Yes.
What L&D invariably doesn't do, it doesn't offer choice. It offers one solution and tries to market that really heavily and say, this is the answer, this is the answer, this is the answer. And it's like, yeah, but is it? Like, is it the thing that is it the thing that everybody needs? It could be like I say, a section of your people need it, but others might not. So design something else.
And this is the thing. So like, I don't disagree with any of that, to be fair. We go back to the phone example where there are, two major phone providers that are, the balloon's coming up, I'm not sure why. There are two major providers for mobile phones that people use, these little supercomputers we've all got in our pockets and run our lives by. Again, to take that analogy even further, when we talk to people about an iPhone, is we always say, straight out of the box, everyone's got the same phone. As soon as you turn it on and choose your language, you're then narrowing that funnel down. As soon as you then put your phone wallpaper to, a photo of you and whoever or whatever it's going to be, then it's unique to you. Then as soon as you start customizing it even further, it is so far removed from everyone else's phone because it's just yours. You've personalized it to that point. But ultimately, anyone else that has that can probably navigate your phone super easily and figure stuff out, and it just works. So like, there is a really lovely user experience that goes with it. It has been designed really well. So with technology platforms that are in learning, it does feel like they're saying it's one solution for everybody and there's very minimal customization or none. And I don't think it's the technology provider's fault to a degree, purely because I don't think people are telling them what they need to know.
Well, yeah, where's the where's the user insight that tells you to validate or disprove that, that hypothesis? It probably doesn't exist within that organization, right? If we look at the old, I don't know how long it's been since Netflix I'm going to do inverted commas, Netflix in learning was a thing. It's like, well, there's a couple of things there where you can't really transpose the consumer grade experience of Netflix to learning or just employee experience more broadly, because number one, there are hundreds of thousands of millions of pounds spent on the quality of that content. I highly doubt that any organization is spending that amount of money, putting that level of production quality on their internal content. Maybe they should, but they're not. And then, to your point, there's that hyper-personalization that my Netflix account looks very different to your Netflix account. Yes. I can say that with some substance, right? But that's built off, data, insight, and the opportunity for personalization with high quality content. I think when you consider Netflix for learning, it's like, okay, how do we personalize the experience? It's like, well, you can't really try and replicate Netflix, because Netflix has a library of thousands of films and TV shows that have had millions of pounds spent on them. So, like, are you telling me your learning content is as compelling as like The Office or Game of Thrones? Yeah, because I don't think it is.
But also, it's got a shed ton of data that it is constantly like updating itself on, based on what everyone else that is similar or like you or has watched similar things to you, based on whatever information you've given it. So the things you mentioned here about personalization, it was personalization data, there was something else you mentioned about, and choice. Like, these are all the things that we talk about in L&D. And there is a data episode, which I think has just come out before your one, where we talk about how much is enough when you've got enough data to be able to move on and like think about things. At the moment, we say all these things about data and personalization, and then we just go, but you're going to sit within this tiny little box and it looks the same box and everyone's got the same box. Good day. Like, that feels a bit shit.
Well, and this is the thing, right, is that most of the data that a HR or L&D team gathers is based on surveys, or it might be interviews and focus groups as part of the human-centered design process. But a lot of that is surveys. Let's not do a whole podcast about surveys, because that would probably be something else, right? But low uptake, low quality, they just don't really work for the majority. Interviews, focus groups, observations and stuff are great, but they're actually quite high input to do. So to implement those on a project by project basis can be quite difficult for an internal team to do. So what you need to be able to do is be getting good quality data and insight just as part of your operating model.
Yes.
Now, if you just look at it through an L&D lens, that's an extremely limited amount of data that you're trying to design products from. But if you expand it out to HR, recruitment, brand awareness, employer brand, internal communications, offboarding, alumni networks, if you look at that holistic customer data, then you'll all of a sudden you have a way more insight to go at. But recruitment has its data over here. Internal comms has its data over here, L&D has its data over here. And it's like, those aren't built into a holistic kind of CRM, essentially, is what you need to be able to understand what your customers are doing, saying, behaving, all that kind of stuff as just a part of BAU, which is why I don't disagree that human-centered design and learning could be valuable, but I think it could be even more valuable if it was a holistic approach where you were just capturing human insight as part of your operating model.
Yes.
And then you can go and do some focus groups and interviews to add more to that.
Yes.
But the problem is most start from a base of well, let's do surveys, interviews, and focus groups and observations, because there's no data there. It was like, there's a lot of data. It's just not all stitched together telling stories.
Well, this is it. And I think that's where there's a bit of a catch-22. So, like, if someone's listening to this going, I agree with everything you're saying, Toby, we want this kind of universal data-driven picture on you as an individual, because we want to market our thing to you, but I can't go and get that because that team won't give it to me, or this team use a different tool to that team, to that team, to that team. So I'm now going to get 4 or 5 different sets of data, all in different formats, plus my own. I'm going to spend more time doing that. By the time I've reconciled all of that, it's all changed anyway, because you've had a different experience. You've gone on holiday and seen something, or you've changed your mind, or life has just moved on. I do feel for people when they go, this is all we've got, so we've got to start somewhere. So I appreciate, there is an element of having a crack at it. But like, when you look at like, so when we've done learning programs for people that talk about consumer driven products and how they're going to do marketing, that kind of thing. And they talk about the customer life cycle, and it's going from like no awareness at all to being aware to how they might interact with it. To then being like a brand ambassador or a poster child of, I use this product all the time and it's great for these reasons. All of that's great. But sometimes it's learning people saying to us, this is what we need to, we need to have an infographic on this customer, whatever it is, customer journey. And then you talk to them about their learning that they would like. And it's like, can you stick this in a PowerPoint or something? And we're like, yeah, are these two things relatable? And obviously they're not, but so they know it. Yeah. But I don't know where the disconnect is for people not to understand that we're doing this all the time anyway. Like we're giving our data away, we're giving our opinions away. If you just go on social media and say, I like this, I hate that, or I put this hashtag, or whatever it's going to be, that's a data point. Like,
well, I spoke to someone the other day, and they recommended like, so they've been doing sentiment analysis about their employer on Reddit. Oh, I was like, wow. And he's like, yeah, we explored the name of the company, I won't say, but they looked at the company data, the threads that people were talking about training at this company, and there was Reddit threads about it. Reams and reams and reams of comments. It's quite a large organization. Do a bit of sentiment analysis using AI, and all of a sudden you've got a whole bank of data there. So the problem is, I think, is that we kind of neglect to appreciate the data points, right? So what we've done in the past is, we've looked at Glassdoor, Indeed, LinkedIn, and then financial metrics that are available, and made stories out of those. And we've told stories about what the employee experience an organization is like without even talking to the company. Mm. And then we kind of go to them and say, hey, this is the information we've got of you. Imagine what we could do if we could actually talk to you and get your own data. Yes, that would be incredible. But to your point,
talking to each other within that company, though, that's
and this is the thing, right? So the last project that we did, we managed to get everyone in the room: recruitment, HR BPs, L&D, benefit comp. The only one we didn't have in there was internal communications, and then we had the HR director as well. And all of a sudden, the light bulbs are going off in the room because it's like, I didn't know that was that. I didn't know that was there. I didn't know this. And it's like, it is just bringing all these people together to be aware of two things: what the data ecosystem looks like and what the user journey looks like, end to end. Because you bet your bottom dollar, if you had a fuller understanding of that, you probably could drop some of the stuff you're designing because you're like, that's kind of covered elsewhere. Yeah. Or it's already on another team's radar and they're already measuring it. It's like that. And you're completely right. This is easier in smaller organizations. Yes. Because there are less people, less stakeholders, all that kind of stuff. If we look at, some of the largest employers in the UK, it probably is impossible because there are so many people to consider in that it's really, really difficult. I can't live with myself to say it is actually impossible, but what you need is HR strategy, people strategy to drive that, because L&D is going to really struggle to drive that by itself when all the other functions are operating from a point of self-validation against a atypical HR strategy. So, L&D is probably going to die off and be reborn into something else, but that's only if you've got all the other components doing the same, because if all the other components aren't doing the same, then it will just stay as is.
Well, this is the thing. So you mentioned this is probably impossible in bigger companies. Now, I'm just going to go on a slight tangent. If you take, regardless whatever your thoughts are on Elon Musk, especially at the moment, we're not going to get into that. If you just think of him as clever rich man, that's all he is, really, if you boil him right down. Clever rich man who decided, I'm going to make a spaceship company, or bought into a spaceship company, and then started flying these spaceships around, and then started putting real people on these spaceships. And then on the other side of that table is NASA, who've been doing this for much longer, way more information, way more experience. And now, I'm sure I saw it the other week, there's the two people that are stuck up in the space station. Mm-hmm. So they're using a SpaceX rocket to go and get them. So clever rich man has just turned up and gone, I'll have a crack at that. If this is the world we're living in right now, it blows my tiny little mind that you can't get an HR director, an L&D director, who all work in the same company, who all have each other's email address, who are all largely on the same team to go, we're here to make sure this company does whatever that company's there to do. Can't just all sit in the room and go, should we all just be pals and like maybe just share information? Because clever rich man is going, you didn't even know about me, but now we're doing something together, like mental.
It goes back to the point that each department within the company, and this sits outside of L&D and HR as well, this is just companies in general, that the whole framework of organization only seeks to validate each individual's existence. Annual performance reviews, job descriptions, all of this thing. What you're expected to do is validate your existence within that company and no more.
Yeah.
And maybe you exceed expectations every couple of years or whatever, right? But everyone benefits from just being exactly what they're supposed to be. And so if you try and stray from that lane, there's no remuneration or incentive to do that, regardless if your CEO or leader says they want entrepreneurs. Like, that's not a thing. That doesn't make any sense because no organization is set up to accept those. I know, because in the past few organizations I've tried to be an entrepreneur and nobody wants it. Because like, no, I need you to do what your box says you do. Yes. And I was like, so, well, which one do you want then? You can't have both. You can have loads of entrepreneurs and loads of people stuck in their box. Mm-hmm. But like, those two things are almost diametrically opposed. It doesn't quite make sense. So, the very fabric of an organization just, makes you do the same thing over and over again, particularly in large organizations. Startups, of course, by their very nature, are completely different.
Of course. But then, like, I can't remember the exact quotes, but isn't like madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result?
Exactly.
So, like, if people are still... And again, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are probably at a point now in L&D, whether their first job, a million years in, whatever job they're in, could all largely agree. They don't like the phrase, well, this is how we've always done it. It grinds their gear. It grinds my gears when you kind of speak to them and go, well, why isn't this working? They go, oh, it's how we've always done it. And you're like, is it? Should it be? But then yet, to your point, companies are saying, well, let's be entrepreneurs, let's do this, let's do that. But then they revert back to, well, this is how we've always done it. This role has always done this because this role does this and this role does that. I don't think it's a bigger shift or as big a shift as people are thinking it will be to take a model like yours and say, get them in a room and figure this out. So then you either stop duplicating things or you start sharing the things that matter, like data, and then you can just kind of get on with it. So like you mentioned about L&D being in a bubble, which I think is the same for a lot of industries, but I don't think L&D is the only problem. Where is it a problem? Well, it has a problem. But two questions on that, actually. Otherwise I'll keep banging on about Elon Musk sending rockets up. So two questions. So the first one is, why is L&D at risk if it continues in this way, in this kind of bubble, doing what it's doing, little by things come up again? And then also, if you give me an example, like, so say we had a client saying, I'd like a leadership program. L&D client comes to you, I'd like a leadership program for this many leaders, just a generic everyday, we want some people to be leaders, let's put on the program. What would your sales pitch be to them about working with other departments? How do you convince them that this isn't an only L&D thing? It's, it's wider.
So the first question, I think the issue I partake with L&D is that it is probably the one department that is doing more innovation, understands more technology more, understands human behavior more. It has this just a way better understanding of what it does than I think the other components within HR. Mm-hmm. Now that's in itself a problem, because L&D struts around the business going, aren't we fantastic? We're amazing. We do lots of cool stuff and you're all rubbish.
Yeah.
I know it's not exactly like that, but that's how it could be perceived, right? So especially with internal comms, the amount of projects I've been on and internal comms have been like a thorn in the side. And it's like, actually, they should be your biggest partner in this. But why they're the biggest thorn in the side is because A, you're trying to take a slice of their pie, and B, you're trying to tell them what to do. And it's like, you haven't really brought them on the journey to bring them onto that. And it's like, well, they should be doing this. It's like, maybe they should, but like, either you can rise above and lead, the strategic direction of your whole HR people department, or you can just sit there and complain about it and go, they're not as innovative, they're not doing that right kind of stuff. They're the two worlds you can live in, really. Yeah. Or your HRD comes in and restructures everything and all that kind of stuff, which is kind of the world I want to work in. So that's the first question. The second question, we want a leadership program designed for X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. I'd probably just say no. And this is why with Emily, I've set up Freeformers, that I was always in organizations that would just say yes. And I was never empowered to say no because I'm not, who's going to turn down X amount of thousands of pounds to do exactly what you've done in the past? No company is ever going to turn that down. In fact, it was one of the reasons I have left companies is like, you've just accepted money to deliver a program that no one here believes in. That has happened at every organization I have been at. You've accepted money to deliver something you don't believe in. Great. So why are we here then? This makes no sense. You're just perpetuating the status quo. I don't want to perpetuate the status quo, so I'm actively going to say no to that kind of stuff. Now, does it make me loads of money? Absolutely not. It does the opposite. But it helps me find the HRDs, the CPOs that are innovating, that want to take a different approach and work with them. And invariably, that is at smaller organizations, because what happens now, I don't talk to HR, L&D, I talk to business owners. I talk to business owners about this and go, okay, you have now 50, 100, 150, 200 people, and you don't really have a HR department at the moment. You have maybe one or two people or fractional HR support looking after you. But actually, this is the world you should design for your employees. This is how you should set up this strategic approach. And of course, to them, it makes sense because I talk about sales, marketing, customer success, product and service design, a language they already know. And we're going to measure the employee experience the same way you measure your customer experience. Like you say, it just is common sense. But you're unable to build that world in those small to medium businesses. In large organizations, not necessarily actively trying to work with companies that are doing what you said, because they're not going to do what I want to do. And there's 101 companies that will design leadership programs for those companies, and that's fine. Yeah. But there'll be people like you that do it way better than most as well, right? So this is the kicker, is that not that you operate in this halfway house, but you're designing the very best thing that the system will allow you to design.
This is the thing, and like I said, I don't disagree. I think there's nuances. So I love the vision. I just feel like the vision the vision is big, and I love the vision. There you go. There's some hearts popping.
Oh, you love that. You literally love the vision.
I'm not entirely sure why my screen's doing this. But then the vision is big, but then like the pool of people that are ready to get on board with it is so small. I feel like there is almost like a halfway house of saying, if you want a leadership program, firstly, you're going to do it anyway. Like whether it's me doing it or something, you're going to do it anyway. But then I think there's a whole load more steps in terms of service design and process design and product design, ultimately, to be able to say, why do you think you need a leadership program? What are you trying to get out of this? And then starting to think about, where would you even start with this? Like, who are these people? What does leadership in this organization look like? Because every company needs a version of leaders, but then every company might need its own unique version of leaders. I think going on this generic version of leadership development that people send their employees on at the moment is just pointless. I've never really seen a good leadership development program that's been any more than, it's got some great branding. It's like, okay, but what are they doing about it? How many people that have been on that program can you now tell me are good leaders because of that? or are they just good eggs that go on a bad program?
Well, I think that there's two factors at play. So there's one. I just go back to the. I'm not going to say approach to data, but certainly approach of impact measurement.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this, right? A couple of years ago, delivered an onboarding program that was a 3-hour webinar on people's first day.
Yeah.
What were the key measures of success? Attrition and brand advocacy. Like, are you really going to try and link 3 hours on someone's first day to attrition? Like, the data is telling you, or I imagine the data would tell you, that actually the dip in brand advocacy happens at about 6, maybe 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening then when the brand advocacy dips that causes people to leave?
Yeah.
Because it isn't, all you're doing on someone's first day is like validating their purchase. Hey, well done. You've made a great purchase.
Yes.
Welcome to the company. Isn't the company great? I'm not saying that that's not necessarily an important part of the journey, but it certainly isn't going to fix attrition. I highly
they
doubt.
had lots of first day quitters.
Yeah.
Like, and that was a reason for doing it. Sorry to cut you off.
But they're not, right. Like, no, the data wasn't saying, oh, everyone leaves. Everyone has such a rubbish first day of this organization that they leave.
Yeah.
Because if you had a rubbish first day, you'd leave within a really bad first day. You would leave in the first day, the first week. You wouldn't even make it past probation. But people were making it past probation, right? So it's like, so is the issue the first day? Should you be spending vast amounts of time and resource on that? Probably not. But I think, but you're empowered there with the data to have that. So I any project that we start, because induction is a huge part of what we do, is like, let's just dig into the data. Let's dig into the data and see what the data's telling us. We want to talk to your people. We want to uncover user insight. Absolutely. But let's dig into the data and see what the data is telling us first, so we know where to target our user insight, rather than going, let's map the whole user journey through focus groups, interviews, observations, and surveys from the moment someone applies to a job to the first end of the first 12 months.
Yes.
Like, well, that is a huge project to do. Also, your department should be just capturing data about what that user journey is like anyway.
Absolutely.
But it might not be. But what can we do? What data can we get, bring together, tell us a story of what this could be like? And
I think to this point is where you kind of almost bring back this like consumer journey model.
Yeah.
So like, if you're an impulse buyer, you're still going through the same journey. You're just doing it in a much, much shorter time frame. So like, you see it, you kind of go, oh yeah, that's for me for whatever reason. You buy it, then you get it. Then you either make a decision there and then, or fairly quickly for an impulse buyer about, did this satisfy my need or solve my problem, whatever it's going to be. And then you have potential brand advocacy, or you just move on to something else because you're an impulse buyer.
Yeah.
And if not, you're maybe the person that takes a little bit longer to think about, what is it I need? What problem do I have? Or do I just have a little bit of cash to burn, or a bit of time to burn, or whatever it's going to be, or a space to fill in my life, whatever it's going to be. And you go through this process. When you're joining a job and it's an onboarding program, that onboarding, that first day, is preluded by a bunch of interviews, probably a load of research you've done on the company, maybe a couple of other job offers, or maybe some sort of promise around what the future might hold. Day one is purely just like the middle of this whole period, that kind of consumer journey period where you're going, I've made some decisions and found out some information. Day one is just where reality hits a little bit, as in I'm not looking from the outside anymore. I'm now on the inside looking in. But I don't know if many people really make their decision based on day one. That it's maybe nice to make sure you've had a nice first day, because it's super nerve-wracking anyway.
yeah.
But other than just going, it's okay. We're not expecting you to fix the world on day one. Just some sort of reassurance. That's probably all you're really looking for on day one, is come back tomorrow. Like,
But this is where LinkedIn is really interesting, right? Because this is a data source that broadly ignored, right? Is that
why though? Why is it ignored?
It's not within our ecosystem. It's like, it totally is within your ecosystem. Glassdoor is in the new ecosystem.
Yeah.
So is Indeed. Like, it is within your ecosystem. Whether you're in L&D, recruitment, or whatever, it doesn't matter. It is in your ecosystem. Sorry, I got quite very matter of fact there, but I'll try and be more jovial.
No, hit me.
But people on their first day, snap a picture of like the mug or the chocolate or whatever that they got given on the first day. Oh, here's me outside this building. Great first day, blah, blah, blah. So like LinkedIn data is a really good indicator of like, what are people saying and doing on their first day? Because you don't need to go and ask them. They're probably posting about it on social media.
But is it like the whole Instagram versus reality thing? I feel like LinkedIn is very much becoming like work version of Instagram. Like, isn't it great? I got a notebook today, and they're like, and then like they don't use that notebook ever.
But they were so inclined to do it. Now, that as an indicator is good, but what you'll see over time with, because I've seen it this week, someone in my network has started a job.
Mm-hmm.
Photos. What will invariably happen? Bam, it'll drop off.
Yeah.
That's when reality hits. Yeah. When they stop posting about how great it is to work there. You know, that's the reality. Because at the moment, they've got, in the nicest possible way, they've not got enough work to do, maybe. Yeah. You know, they've got the freedom where they're open, they're curious, they're exploring. I can take selfies in front of buildings and say I've met this person, because that's the whole onboarding journey is just about networking within your organization and meeting new people. Once those posts stop, that's when reality set in. What's happening now? Why are you not posting about your employer on LinkedIn anymore? Then go to them and say, like, because obviously we've crafted a really great experience for you for your first 3 months because you've posted about it on social media a hell of a lot. But then what happened after 3 months? Oh, well, I had a lot of meetings in my diary and all the blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, cool. Tell me more about this stuff now. Yeah. Because all of a sudden you're not necessarily as fulfilled in your work because you've now been part of the grind. Yes. What's that variance like? And how does that differ to your expectations?
And this is it. So this going back to the consumer journey thing is where if you're at the kind of the later stages of that consumer journey, you've got the product or you've used the service or whatever it is. In this instance, it's you've started the job, you're doing the job. You've had it for a little while, you kind of know what real life is like with it. It's like when someone says you can test drive a car for the weekend rather than just that 10 minutes around the block with the salesman. You kind of see what it's like in your real life rather than when they go, oh, this road's really nice and you can go a little bit fast here and there's no cameras. Like, what's it like when there are cameras and you are sat in traffic and you know, your dog wants to get in and your kids are screaming? Like, is that car still nice? That's like the later stages of this analogy. So like, will you be a brand advocate and continue to post and go, this is still great? Yes, it can be a bit busy, but that's part of the job and I really enjoy it and that's what I joined for. Or is it, geez, man, like this is not what I signed up for. Like, I'm just busy and I'm just getting on with it. Like, no one wants to read that post on LinkedIn. Yeah. Hi guys, this week I just did some work and it was fine. Cheers. Like, what kind of no one's going to engage with that apart from going, yeah, me too. Yeah, probably.
But that's interesting then, because like, so not every employee is going to post about their job all of the time. No. Obviously that's the case, right? But who are posting, when are they posting, and what about becomes really interesting. And also, what are they like as a percentage of the entire population of people on LinkedIn from your company? Because even that is like, even as a metric, right? Oh, 20% of our employees talk about us on LinkedIn. Last year, it was only 5%. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. What are they talking about? What is the sentiment? Like, what's that kind of going? If 100% of your employees are talking about on your LinkedIn, I'd be a bit worried. Well, you're probably a startup, right? That's probably where you're at.
Because there's two of you to work there, yeah.
Exactly.
But then what? So like, I didn't post, actually, until I started doing this company, I didn't really post a huge amount on LinkedIn because I just found it, again, personally, I just found it a little bit cringe going, hi guys, I'm really enjoying this. But also with that same token, I don't have Facebook, I don't have Instagram. I'm not a big poster on other platforms. So I'm probably going to be a type of person that doesn't fall into that category of, there's probably a lot of data I can give you because I was enjoying it or not, or didn't post for a while because of whatever reason, and then did if I was a poster. But I was just kind of like across the board, I just don't really post. Like,
well, and that's absolutely fine. If you look at, there are 5 kind of key archetypes that act on social media, and you were a lurker. Lurker is a well-defined, and that's fine. Yeah. And it's like, all lurkers and trolls are like are very negative terms, whereas like window shopper, the selfie, all that kind of stuff, a bit more positive.
It just sounds a bit more like a bit French and a bit mysterious. But I'll take the creepy lurker vibe. That's cool.
But you account for that in you're analysing the data, right? You know there is a percentage of employees that are lurkers on LinkedIn and not actively taking pictures and that kind of stuff. So it's like you'd never expect 100% uptake. I think you'd barely accept 20% to be completely honest. But like, what is the benchmark? And also, guess what? All your competitors' employees are probably on LinkedIn as well. So you could probably do a little bit of benchmarking. Go, which employer in your industry is generating the most conversation on LinkedIn about that company?
But then also, if you flip that completely, what are people not saying? Because I can't imagine 20% of people that are posting are going to go on there and say, this week, something really shitty happened at work and I didn't like it and they handled it really badly, or I'm really against what we're doing now as a company, blah, blah, blah. And if you do it, even if you feel that way, you probably wouldn't say those kind of things on LinkedIn because you're an employee. Generally,
that stuff only gets said and felt and distributed once someone's left. So someone's very rarely likely to say that whilst they're at a company, unless there is this open culture, which I don't think anyone's ever created. Like, are you going to say something? Because I've done it in the past. I've said stuff that completely goes against the grain of what the company's saying, and I've had a managing director say to me, "Is like, what gives you the right to say that? What my opinion?"
Yeah,
free speech is probably what gives me the right. But anyway, obviously we don't have that here. So, but what does happen is that then translates itself onto something like Glassdoor, and the Glassdoor, everyone will say, "Oh, it was just a disgruntled employee." It's like, that's just a cop out, because every company in the world is now reviewed in the same kind of way as an employer, but also as a customer. We've got TripAdvisor, Trustpilot, Google reviews. Yeah. Like no customer-facing brand goes, "Oh, well, we've got bad reviews just because of disgruntled customers." Well, I was like, well, if they were disgruntled customers, you'd get your customer success or service team to execute. Yeah, an employer goes, "Oh, it's just disgruntled employees." Cool, what are you going to do to fix that? Oh, nothing, it's their fault.
But this is the thing. So, like, if you look at, like, almost every product and service that we use outside of work. So if I just pick a handful off the top of my head. So anything that has Google reviews, if you go on some sort of trip or vacation, you're probably going to be looking at TripAdvisor, like for restaurants or locations or attractions, those kind of things. And then even just taking an Uber, like at the end of your ride, you automatically get there. How would you rate this driver? You get 0 to 5 stars, and then some categories just to go, I'll give him 5 stars. He ran all the red lights and got me there early. Like, great, this guy's a legend. Like, that can be the thing you can do. Or you can be like 1 star because he ran all the red lights and I was absolutely terrified. So you've got the option of doing that. So it's natural for people to say, you had a product or service that you engaged with or experienced. What do you think? Because we need to know the good and the bad. So it does feel crackers that there are still, not just L&D, because that'd be unfair to say it's just them, companies in general that are just saying, we're really all about data, but we don't want to hear the bad stuff, or we're gonna push down the bad stuff. But I think again there should be proper mechanisms for that. So if somebody is stood outside the office going, "This company's rubbish because John, my old boss, was a real pain in the arse and I hate him and he bullied me," and it's like, is that the best place to do that? I mean, that's feedback that they probably need to hear about fictitious John. Just, legally, this John doesn't exist. But then, standing outside on the street isn't the best place to do it. So where should he have gone? Where can they go to do that? Like, there needs to be proper data capture. Otherwise, going back to your point originally about silos, this will just be in a silo. And then that's almost like a sub-silo of stuff we don't really want to hear about because we want to keep this box, the box it's already in. Yeah.
And so obviously, like LinkedIn and Glassdoor, we create that scenario where that's publicly available data. You can go and see that. Anybody can go and see that. That's useful. I'm not saying create a whole data strategy around those two things, because the Uber example you just give is really good, is that they need a data point at a moment in time to tell them something. Mm-hmm. So they put the star rating at the end of a journey.
Yes.
What HR does is pulse survey, same time every year. I was like, well, that doesn't align itself to a moment in time for the user or the company. Well, it does for the company because it might be like a month from year end or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So that gets into not only does the data capture need to be at a moment in time where it's valuable, it also needs to be consistent and frequent enough where you can track it over time is the other thing. But also it has to be for the benefit of the end user and the creator of that mechanic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is where Uber get it right? Driver rates person rates Uber.
Yeah.
Uber driver. Like that happens. But what we tend to do is create this one-way metric is the employer wants to get stuff out of employees rather than the employer wants to give stuff to employees.
Yeah.
And so there's loads of stuff out there that says that actually, by analyzing oneself and getting some data, then that can instigate a different in mindset. This is why psychometric tests are really valuable, because they either validate what you're thinking and instigate a thought process, but you give data to someone and they give you something back. That's why people engage with them.
Yes.
If you did a psychometric test, just gave away all that information and then never got that report back, would you do it? Absolutely not. You kind of go, you're just scraping my data. Well, guess what? Psychometric tests are scraping your data anyway. Yeah. They're just placating you by giving you something back. Facebook is is built on that model.
It's a transaction. That's all it is. And every person, probably over the age of 2, I would argue, is used to some sort of transaction. Whether it's, I would like this. Well, if you do this, then you've earned your reward. Or if you pay this much, or if you do this action, you will get whatever it is back. So where was I going with this? So basically trying to explain about good product and service design, because it's not just tangible things, it's service as well, is very much about, it needs to work for both parties.
Yeah.
Or it needs to be as close to 50-50 working for both parties. So and we always explain this to people that just because if it's going to help the business, as in the business needs to protect themselves against some sort of regulation or whatever it's going to be, fine. Then that's something that you have to adhere to. We can make that happen. But then the people that you're trying to give this to, your customers, your employees, it has to work for them as well. Why should they care about it? Why should they be engaged with it? And then what should they be able to do comfortably, or at least with the least aggravation possible, to be able to get on with their day? Otherwise, they can just try and say, I'm going to work somewhere else, or I'm not going to do your thing. Or if I get it wrong, you're the one that gets fined, and I just get a slap on the wrist. So is it really that important to me? So it has to be, you have to think of every end product and service in the minds of both parties. Or if there's a third one to chuck them in as well. But everyone needs to have equal measure. And
it goes back to the thing that you said, right? Employment is a product.
Yeah.
Employment is a product. Yeah. If you think of employment of anything else, you're kind of slightly deluded, because no one's going to stay at your company for 20 years. They're probably going to stay there for 3 or 4 years and then move on. So there is a transient relationship that you're going to enter in at one end, and you are definitely going to come out the other end at some point. Now, as an employer, what is that person going to say about your company once they've left? Because now it's like, you're not trying to make them stay for as long as possible. That is impossible. Don't try and fight the societal trend, but try and make sure that when they leave, they become the biggest advocate of your company. So they return in sales, recruitment, referrals, all this kind of stuff. But all that stuff is predicated on a great experience. To your point, in this transactional relationship, everyone defaults to money. Okay, we need you all to do a survey. Here's some money. Here's a voucher. Everyone who completes it might, and even in some companies, it's like most expect them to do it for free. The second will be like, okay, we will put you in a draw to get a 20 quid voucher, or everyone will get cash if they do it.
Yeah.
The latter very rarely happens, but it doesn't really inspire the uptake. I've done this very early in my career. I gave away the opportunity to win a £1,500 worth of camera equipment.
Wow.
It had zero impact on the uptake for that survey. Zero impact. It was exactly the same uptake as the week before, because it's like, I just don't want to engage with this laborious process that adds no value to their lives. It's the same with Google. Google's recruitment referral, I don't know the exact number. I think it was $2,000 for a successful hire. You will get $2,000 as a bonus.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Sorry, then
I found something related. Do you want to know, does Google take referrals seriously?
No. Now it thinks I'm talking about it. And I now have to say it because otherwise I'll start talking again. But that company, they offered £2,000 as a referral bonus. They went, we want more of these. So they increased it to $4,000. Had zero impact. Because it's much more nuanced on the advocacy and the experience you have as an employee. And all of a sudden you kind of go, well, I've now got to think way harder about how I create this relationship. So it isn't as transactional, money in, money out, but it's actually experiencing performance out. And that,
just to boil this down to almost like a really simple version. If you go on Amazon, just checking your thing isn't going to start talking again. If you go onto, that marketplace website and you look for any product, like literally any product they sell, you don't only have the option of filtering by cost low and high or high to low. You have lots of other things you can filter by as well. Like if it's a laptop, for example, it's like what brand is it? What screen size is it? What processor it has? All these different things based on your needs or your wants and needs. As in, I want something powerful, but I don't really want to spend a huge amount of money. And I need a kind of medium sized screen or a particular size screen so it fits in the bag I've got, all the rest of it. So it becomes much more than just, is it expensive or not? Will you be parting with cash or not? It might also even just be down to, I don't really care, but I need it tomorrow. So which ones will you be able to send me by tomorrow if I order it right now? And I think it's the same thing with, like you were saying about employment, as in, again, going back to your point about these things shouldn't be in a silo. There are so many other things that affect that person. And also that when learning products are created that can utilize those other things, that if they're not being utilized, then your product and service is almost hamstrung from the beginning because you've not given it a chance to survive or to have a good kind of release into the world.
Yeah, product design inside an organization is quite an interesting one because if, the organizations that are out there that talk about like creating consumer grade stuff, like if it's consumer grade, it would live and survive outside the world of work. Mm-hmm. A lot of the stuff I've seen would not survive outside the world of work, but it survives inside the world of work because it's like, well, we must have designed the right thing. People just don't engage with it. So let's ram it down their throats. And you're like, if you took that approach outside the world of work, you wouldn't make money. But all of a sudden, because you've got a yes, if you're going to physically ram iPhones down people's throats, then you're going to be in trouble.
Well, U2 put their album on iPhones, and that pissed me off. I didn't have that iPhone actually, to be fair, but
isn't that a really good example though? That U2 had a product and they literally rammed it down people's throats, and there was a rebellion. Well, yeah, but inside the world of work, you kind of go, okay, we're going to push out this thing, whether it's internal comms, whether it's an L&D initiative, whatever it is, we're going to push this out and you're going to enjoy it. And it's like, and then some people go, oh, well, like some people don't use it or don't want it. Mm-hmm. There isn't the U2 rebellion, because they're not empowered to have the U2 style rebellion because they're not a consumer in this relationship. Yeah. But all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's the employee's problem that they've not engaged with this or whatever. There's also not
the repercussions of a product failing or not being utilized, as in that team that have made it don't all lose their job overnight and go, we've run out of money. Yeah. They maybe run out of budget for that year, but they can just go and make another product and have another crack at it. If you were a startup and said, we're putting all of our bets onto this product that we're making, you release it to your market and your market then says, we're actually fine, we don't need this or we don't want this, you would likely go bust as a company, which is then ironically going back to companies wanting entrepreneurs, as in, if you genuinely thought like an entrepreneur, then you would be thinking, we need to make sure that every product we release has a need, has a purpose, is immediately, or at least very quickly recognized by our consumers as, that's going to solve this problem, or that's going to be really fun, or whatever it is you want them to do with it. And if you don't have that, why are you making it?
Yeah.
Like, it is really that simple.
But it comes to the point where you validate your own existence, right? It's like, if you are in charge of induction and onboarding for a big corporate, You will live and die by whether did you deliver an induction and onboarding program that people enjoyed this year. Did you? Yes, tick. Didn't you? Well, then you're probably going to not have a job. But I mean, if your job is induction and onboarding and you don't deliver that, then you probably don't deserve it. But the whole framework is geared towards validate your own existence. Don't create the best thing for your people, because it's just, like I say, that's the system with which we currently operate. It doesn't allow you to be fluid enough to say, I've gathered loads of views as an L&D team. I've gathered loads of user insight, and this is what we should deliver, because the expectation is you're going to deliver something for L&D, and that's probably what will happen. Where it might be you kind of say, actually, what's not working here is we've got too many Microsoft Teams channels. No one's collaborating because there's choice paralysis. No one's engaging with any of these community chats, because there's just too many of them. Not let's pump out loads of training on how Microsoft Teams works. Oh, you're a voyeur, right?
And then there's still too much choice to be creepy and listen into.
But the worst thing I could do is try and deliver some training to make the lurkers and the voyeurs into active social media, like having an active kind of presence on these communities, because that doesn't make sense. Because
it's not their deal.
Facebook doesn't go in. Well, actually, Facebook and LinkedIn do try and do this. They create the mechanics to kind of go, oh, post something. I
got asked 6 times in the last couple of weeks, are you hiring? I was like, no, still not hiring. Stop asking me. Do you want to post about hiring? No, still not doing that. So maybe I'll let you know when I'm doing it. I found it a little bit annoying, but
but I think LinkedIn probably goes a bit too much like people who are successful on LinkedIn post at least 3 times a week. And you're like, okay, cool. I'm not going to do that. but there's that whole element of product design, which is you're creating nudges there. Yeah. Booking.com is really good as an example to try and get people to book a room there and then, because there's only 2 left at this price. Trainline does exactly the same thing.
Those things, again, just on a tangent, those things got called out for it recently to say you didn't just have 2 left. You shouldn't be doing this. So I think, again, whilst that is a external product with real life financial and legal ramifications, I think internally you can almost take a note out of their book to be able to say, if you have a captive audience, as in people that work in this organisation already, what can you give them to say, let's spark a little bit of urgency, or try and hook them, and don't lie to them, that's not what I'm trying to say, but but try and hook them in whilst you've got their attention, because whilst they do work there, you do have their email address, and you can put stuff around where they're likely to see it. They've also got their phone, which will give them a gazillion messages about a gazillion things that are not the things you're trying to tell them. And they will be super easily distracted as soon as something happens on their phone, or if they're not immediately hooked on that. So it's, again, that brings in sales and marketing, commercial elements and internal comms, rather than just, it's great, we made it, so please use it.
I live in the middle of the countryside, so I'll tell you the middle of the countryside story. I was talking to someone who is on the parish council.
Nice.
And they had a litter pick recently to clear up litter from the village. And they were like, oh, hardly any people came. I was like, well, who did you tell? I was like, oh, I put a message in the Facebook group about 3 weeks ago. Cool. How many? Oh, no, just that one.
Yeah.
All right. So that one thing, because again, they come from the priority. It comes from a very selfish point. It's like, if I post this once, people will look at it. And again, it's the same from an employer perspective. If I post this once, I don't have to say it again because I've said it and I'm important enough that they should have read it. Unfortunately, that's just not the way the world works. Because like you say, so many notifications, so many messages about various things. There is that balance between not doing it too much and not, like the LinkedIn example, right? Yeah. Don't do it too much, but don't just assume that because you've posted it once, people look at it. I worked under a leader who's like, they were using Workplace by Meta at that point, which is obviously now being sunsetted. But they were like, what I want everyone to do is I want everyone to like my post to let me know they've read it. And you're like, could you imagine if someone did that on any external form of social media? You'd be like, that is ridiculous. The onus is on you as a content creator to make that content engaging enough that people want to react to it. That is extremely lazy leadership. So everyone like my post, so I know you've read it.
Yeah.
Because what I think you're looking for is an email.
Yes. Yeah. And also, like, it's very easy to go like and not read it. And just
well,
just to
invariably,
avoid
that's
the
what I
rush.
actually did. I
Yeah.
just went, end of the week, cool. I've read all that leader's posts.
Yes.
Trying not to say
Yeah.
their name.
And when they start getting 7 notifications from Toby at the end of the week, it's a bit like, he's either a very fast reader or he is fudging the system.
He really loves my content at the end of the week. I'm going to post all my content at the end of the week now because that's when all my users are liking it. And it's like,
yeah.
exactly.
Bringing this back to the potential end of L&D or the death of L&D, whatever kind of catastrophic clickbait title we want to go with. If we fast forward to 2030 and then again from there to 2040, what in your mind, not in an ideal world, but what you think actually might happen, what is L&D going to look like?
In 10 years' time, I don't think a lot will have changed, to be honest. I think L&D will have adopted technologies and processes to make themselves better at what they're currently doing. So obviously everyone's talking about AI at the moment, but AI is essentially, for the majority, just doubling down on what already existed. So I think in the next 10 years, we'll have hopefully got over that kind of hump and we'll actually be using technologies to innovate what we're doing rather than just improve efficiency and output of what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think in 20 years, the companies that have started doing things differently, like I said, the small to medium businesses were the ones that set up their people infrastructure differently. They'll have become slightly larger companies and there'll be case studies out there that people have gone, oh, actually, maybe this is the way we should be doing things. Now, my hope is that we'd be there in 10 years. I think that'd be very naive of me to say that we'd reach that change. But certainly in the case studies that we're creating, I think the small to medium business market changes substantially.
Yeah.
In the next 10 years. I think the large corporate space doesn't change a lot until the things have changed. And then the small to medium market in the that next 10 years to 2040, let's say, they start impacting what large organizations are doing, much like fintechs, right? The Starlings, the Monzos, the Revoluts of the world did things differently. And then every bank started doing it, and to the point where, someone like Starling, for example, is very much just like a corporate bank now internally than it would be, 10 years ago when it was a smaller player, right? So I think that's probably, that's where we'll get to, the challenger companies that are doing stuff differently. And they already exist. There are some of those that already do it differently, but they haven't been able to demonstrate the process and system in which they do it. They just do it because it's in their head and heart. This is how I'm going to run my small to medium business. So they haven't really demonstrated that there's impact there, which is a problem, but they also haven't kind of codified it so you could adopt it.
Yes.
So that's going to be the thing that happens over the next 10 years. It'll be proven that it's valuable, it'll be codified, and then large companies will start adopting it. And those who don't will hopefully die.
Wow. Well, we're going to put that out as a trailer, but with no context, just so it sounds like you're just, you're being very blanket driven to everybody. Thank you. Thank you for that soundbite. We're near the end, but little small anecdote. As a teenager, I read NME, and if you don't know what NME is, it's the New Musical Express. It was a little paper that used to go and buy, and then it started failing, and then you could get it for free. And I don't think there's even a paper anymore. But when I was a teenager, which was many years ago, it was the holy grail of music every week. That's where you would go and find out what was going on. And then I'm going to guess every 7 to 8 weeks, there will be a cover story with another band, and it would say, literally, word for word, the new saviors of rock and roll. And it would be, fucking Coldplay was on there once, and I was like, no, not having that. It would be worse if it was U2, but Coldplay were there. I really don't like U2. They never were. It was a throwaway statement, and it was said so many times you were just like, is it? Are they? I don't really care if the photo's cool, but that title was rubbish. So taking that kind of throwaway nature, what do you think are the actual saviours of L&D, or what do you think they're likely to be? And how would you see them kind of playing out? What's the Coldplay version that people think it is, and what's the actual version that it is?
The Coldplay version is the Coldplay version is AI for sure. It was, a few years ago it was VR. I think blockchain was in there at some point. Like, these are going to be the things that change. Like, They come and go. The Coldplays of the L&D world come and go, and thank goodness they do.
If they do, I'm leaving. If they stay, I'm out.
AI is going to substantially change things more than blockchain and VR for sure. So it's a bit flippant, but it's the front page article at the moment. I think that the thing that's going to substantially change are people that are willing to challenge, the old Apple thing, challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
I don't think there's enough people out there that do challenge the status quo because the status quo is safe. And they innovate within the status quo, which isn't actually necessarily innovating, really. So going out and saying stuff that challenges the status quo. I'm not saying do exactly as I say and do. I'm not there's a number of approaches. Perry Timms is a great example, right? Developed a new way of thinking about a human resources function.
Yeah.
No one's necessarily paid him to just do that. He's actually just gone and done it on his own volition. And so therefore this is what the world could look like.
Yes.
Me and Emily have done the same. This is what the world could look like. I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm not preaching about it. I'm not saying that this is the way it's going to be. I'm saying it's an option.
Yes.
So I think the saviors will be those people that create alternative options to the status quo.
Yes. And I completely agree with that. And I think one of the things, and again, it's probably no surprise to me, is taking product design into learning, which I don't think we're a million miles away from. But I feel like maybe it goes back to the language we use or the way it's always been done, those kind of things where it's easy for some people to say it, but when you actually get around to doing it, it should be a lot easier than I think some people make it. I think, yeah.
And I think that's a really good point. So, putting a product design approach into L&D will essentially kill L&D itself, because what you then become is you become a more holistic employee experience design team.
Yes.
And that can only be a good thing. By innovating in the right way, in changing the system and processes in which L&D operates, by truly adopting product and service design, will get you to a point where you're elevated to such a point in your organization where it's like, oh, you don't just do L&D now. You look after the end-to-end user journey.
Yes.
And I think that's where it gets to, right? That's where it's the evolution of what L&D, it transforms, it metamorphosizes, it comes from this ugly, chubby caterpillar into a lovely product and service design butterfly. You can tell which book I'm reading to my daughter at the moment.
Amazing. Hats off. But again, I'm not bagging on awards here at all. I think they're a great idea for people to be genuinely recognised by the industry, as in, you did a thing, it was better than the other things in this category. Well done. Claudia Winkleman's on stage to tell you how great you are. That's lovely. And I'm not going to take
half cut as well, probably, from what I've seen.
Brilliant. Give her more. Let her have a nice night out. And I'm not taking that away from anyone, because some people most people that win those things genuinely deserve them and have generally had a crack at it and done a really nice thing. But then again, if you take this as a product design, ecosystem, I hate using that word, but as a whole thing, basically, your product isn't just judged, and the longevity of that product and even that business unit, if you take the entrepreneurship side into it, just by how many awards you win or how many other of your peers turn around and say, that was really good. And do you know what? It was better than ours. And, kudos. It's your users and your customers.
So, okay, I'll tell you a story. At a company I used to work for, developed a really cool learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
Won awards, stakeholders were happy, learning and development team in that organization was happy, everyone was super jazzed about it. And then 2 months later, my brother-in-law, who worked at that company, took me aside at my niece's birthday party and went, I just did this. I had this learning experience. He didn't call it a learning experience. He used words I cannot use on this podcast. But I went through this learning experience. I've got to tell you, what a waste of time. It was one of the most awful things I've ever been through. It was pointless. It burned through my time. It made me unhappy. And I just cannot tell you how bad it was.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, what was it called? And then he said the name of it. I was like, oh no, this was about. It's like, yeah, that's us. That's that's This is a company I used to work for, by the way. This isn't a company I do work for now.
Yes.
Just to be super clear, it was five years ago. I'm not that person anymore, because that was one of those pivotal moments in my career when I was like, well, I can't be part of that.
Yeah.
Like, what? Yeah. Like, I can't win awards, be patted on the back, and have a salary for making my brother-in-law and everyone that's around him miserable.
Yes.
Like, that doesn't sit well with me. He actively told me it didn't help him do his job. Didn't make his day any better. I was like, okay, so what did it do? He goes, oh, it did nothing. It just literally pissed him off and got in the way. Great. I won an award for that.
I mean, two things that a product shouldn't do, just in case anyone's unclear about that.
I know, right? It's just, I don't. I mean, if you're designing a product that gets in people's way and pisses them off, then I don't know what kind of product you're designing.
Speed cameras. I think those are the only things.
That's such like what was that thing in Friends? Like, there's no such thing as a selfless act or something like that.
Yes.
That I think that there's no such product that's designed to annoy people and get in their way. Yes. But you've found the one. You found the one.
That's it. Genius. Before we go, last question for you. So we've been talking for an hour and 15 now. Maybe this will get edited down a little touch. But I think I think we've had a good wide-ranging conversation. If we were to summarise the conversation we've had, the experiences you've had, your vision, where you see people right now, where you see the industry right now. If somebody come to you and said, I'm into that. This is, this guy's talking my language, or I can get on board with this, but I'm stuck in the right now. Like, this is what's happening right now. I can't change that all on my own. What advice would you give to them to either get themselves ready for the future, or start to do, or things they can do to help them start to kind of, move things that are happening around them? What things can people take away from this conversation? What would you recommend to them?
The first step that I've seen the most effective is to, rather than run a human-centered design initiative, like the process as a project, run it as a holistic kind of departmental project. So number one, how do we capture user insight and activity and behavior on a frequent and regular basis? As a HR team, not just as an L&D team. Now, of course, it'll probably come from an L&D perspective, but how can you look at how you do that? How do you bake it into what you do? And then how can you socialize that?
Yeah.
Now, I know a lot of people, because I've heard all the messages and stuff and comments on LinkedIn go, we don't have time to do that. Like, it's kind of your priority to do, I'm afraid. Yeah. Like the reason why it's difficult and hard is because you try and bake it in at the beginning of every project. Yeah. Oh, it's a human-centered design learning project. We need to do research. We need to do research. We need to do... Time and experience has told me that is hugely... is costly in both terms of time and money. If you're using an external provider, you're better off trying to do that approach once on a slightly larger scale and bake it in and socialize it with your wider team, with internal comms, with recruitment. Say, look, we've just done this piece of research. We were just initially looking at, let's say, induction onboarding, but actually we found out all this user insight. Get them all to room, present that user journey, tell them where the pains and gains are. Should we measure this on a regular basis? What should we design as a result? And then, because we've actually applied some metrics to it, can we demonstrate that it's improved? Yeah. I think if L&D are gonna wait for the opportunity for this approach to work with inside their organization, it isn't going to happen. You're going to have to, manage upwards, right? You're going to have to manage upwards. Because, as we've talked about on this podcast, the HRD or CPOs of the world that are going to come to the table with this are very few and far between. Yes. And this is where I think L&D has that huge opportunity to manage upwards and transform itself into product and service design.
Yes. And I hope so. And I think so the way we talk about data gathering is that you don't just focus on the headline problem. You then start to look at lots and lots of other things that are happening, and you go outside of the problem. You go all over the place. I'm not sure if that's my dog or yours trying to get in. If anyone can hear
if it's my dog trying to get into your house, I'd be worried. We don't live near each other.
It's someone's dog.
I also don't have a dog, so I don't know why if I did like.
I think it's definitely my dog then. She's probably outside trying to get in. I'll let her in afterwards. She's lovely. But then, what was I saying? So, yes, I think what we're trying to say is you have to go outside of the problem, because at the moment, functions like companies and functions aren't set up in a way to get this holistic data. So you have to go and get some version of that right now. So we're trying to bridge the gap between what you should have and what you can get. And those two things aren't a million miles away from each other, but you need to start thinking way bigger than just this. It needs to be this.
Yeah.
But then to your thing, it's this. That's even bigger. If anyone's only listening to this, my hands just went from very small to slightly medium to much bigger.
Big fish, little fish, tiny fish.
Yeah, there is no cardboard box here. If anyone's old enough to remember that, then
because you've just told everybody to think outside of the box.
Oh, legend! I think we should end it there. We're not going to get more. Yeah,
it will not get any better than that. I guarantee you.
And I probably should let my dog in before she breaks through the door. But this has been brilliant. Is there anything you want to plug? We usually do this right at the very end. Anything you want to say? Any shout outs? Anything that you feel you'd like to tell people?
Just come and talk to me and Emily. We just want to talk about this as much as we can, because if we can just change a few companies to change their approach, then that's what we want to do. We want to get people to do that. So yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn, connect with Emily on LinkedIn as well. And let's just have a conversation about it, because there needs to be a community effort to drive change. We're not going to do it by ourselves. So if you're like-minded, if you like what we say, just connect with us and let's take the conversation on from there.
Amazing. I would highly recommend that. It's definitely, from the conversations we've had recently, it's been enlightening. It's been nice. It's been refreshing to hear something different.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. And likewise, to find like-minded individuals. Like I say, we found each other through Patrick Malarkey, which I'm really thankful for. But if this podcast can make even more of those connections happen and find, like-minded people like ourselves, then that's only a good thing. And
that is a lovely segue, because Patrick is the next episode. So
no way.
Yeah. So Patrick's talking about MVP and testing. So in 2 weeks from whenever this was released, Patrick will be released. He's not captured somewhere. His episode will be released, and you can all listen to it. It'll be really, really fun. But cool. Thank you so much, Toby. And we'll probably have you back on another episode where we have like a couple of people gabbing about a topic.
Awesome. I'd love to do that. Thank you.
Nice one. Thanks, sir. Have a lovely day.
Cheers. You too.
Cheers.